If you're a small business owner, you'll know just what it's like to be the chief everything officer. HR, payroll, employee benefits. Well, Gusto can do all of that for you. Gusto is online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all in one, remote friendly, and incredibly easy to use. It's quick and simple to switch to Gusto. Just transfer your existing data to get up and running fast. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/lockedonsoccer and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's gusto.com/lockedonsoccer.
Whether you're watching your favorite NBA team at the arena, the bar, or hanging at home, grab an ice-cold Michelob Ultra and enjoy every moment of the NBA season. Stock up today and watch your team drop buckets with a bucket full of ice-cold Ultra. Michelob Ultra. Superior light beer.
Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2026 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra. Registered light beer. St. Louis, Missouri. Must be 21 plus to order alcohol. Alcohol available only in select markets.
Are all batteries the same? That's like asking if all soccer players are the same. Take Messi, the most decorated player ever. Is there any other player who has achieved that? No, just him. Now take Duracell. Is there any other battery with power boost ingredients inside? No, just Duracell. Remember, goats only trust goats because they're built different. And Messi only trusts Duracell.
Hello and welcome to Away the Podcast. It's Martin here, and we've got another episode of ROKER Rewind for you today. We've got the third and final part of our deep dive into the legendary G-Force, Eric Gates and Marco Gabbiadini. So far, we've covered how Gates and Gabbiadini came to be paired together, how they performed in their first couple of seasons at ROKER Park, and Denis Smith's seemingly eternal quest to get another big striker into that mix. So today we're looking at the third and final season of the G-Force together at Sunderland and trying to answer the question, was the G-Force Denis Smith's greatest managerial decision, his biggest stroke of luck, or something in between? And of course, I've got a couple of people to help me go through this final chapter this morning. And first of all, we'll say hello to Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, morning, Martin. Morning, everyone. Are you sure you want to say for definite this will be the third and final part?
You know, I was thinking that when I said that.
You might need to re-record that introduction.
We might have to, knowing us, but we'll see, won't we? There's a season to go through. It's an action-packed season, so there's plenty to talk about, isn't there? And joining myself and Andrew today is a man who's managed to escape the clutches of some rather large gentlemen from Sheffield during the course of the week. He's dodged an elbow or two while reaching up to get his tin of baked beans from the shelves of Morrison's. It's Kelvin Beatty.
Oh, hey, you steal one sheep, eh? Well, I'm so glad I got into that last episode. Anyway, morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm looking forward to this one. We're all on the pitch at the end of this episode, lads.
We are indeed. And yes, good morning to all listeners, especially Mr. Whitehurst. Good morning, sir. Right. Kelvin sends his love. We left the last episode at the end of the 88-89 season, and it fizzled out a little bit to some extent. Thomas Hauser had arrived at the club in February, Andrew. Denis Smith had bigged him up ahead of the new season, and he was hoping to put some pressure onto Eric Gates and to Marco Gabbiadini. As was typical for Thomas, who was unfortunate during his time at Sunderland, he picked up an injury in the pre-season, which kind of forced Denis Smith's hand to a large extent in terms of who was going to play up front. David Rush was coming through at this point as well, and he was scoring goals in reserves, and Denis Smith was talking him up a little bit as well. And then Eric Gates, it was the middle of August, 15th of August, on the eve of the season, really, a week or two before the season starts, he confirmed to everybody he would be retiring at the end of the season. He said, I've said I'll get out when I was 35 and I haven't changed my mind. I'll be 35 next June, and that qualifies me for a pension with the PFA. I had my testimonial at Ipswich, so I'll just go quietly at the end of the season. Whether I score 2 or 20 goals, that's it. There's no going back. My decision is final. So again, it's one thing to look back at all of this in hindsight, but if you're Denis Smith at this time, you've got Gatesy saying that, and you're planning for the future. You're planning for the next few seasons, aren't you? To a large extent, you've got Thomas Howard, who you brought in, who you fancy quite a lot. You've talked up. You've spent a decent amount of money on him. He's picking up injuries. It's a little bit of a difficult position for Denis Smith to be in, as he's looking to get Sunderland back up to the first division ultimately. And he's got this, I guess, this inconsistency, this uncertainty around who his strike force is going to be. And that's not going to be easy for him when he's planning for the new season. He's looking at how we're going to attack the season. There's a few variables for him to consider there, isn't there?
There is. There's all sorts happening to impact his plans. And a manager very rarely is going to be happy about an unsettled side. A manager like Denis Smith is going to want to try and come up with a preferred starting 11. It's not like now when you have a squad and there's terms like starters and finishers and all of that floating around. It was still an era where you went with your best side and you only changed it if you have to. The Eric Gates retirement tour must have been must have had a lot of opposition players and managers just looking out for him, just underlining on the fixture list when Eric Gates is coming to their town. I'm sure there was a few scores wanted to be settled because Gatesy, bless him, over the years got involved in a few controversies. I don't know if we've really touched on it in these podcasts, but there was a feeling or an accusation that he wouldn't mind taking a dive if he needed to. So I think that ruffled a few feathers. Kelvin obviously wants to set the record straight on that. But there probably were a few people thinking, right, well, if we're only going to get one more opportunity, we're going to kick Eric Gates up a height in this last season. The Hauser one really intrigues me, Martin, because I love Thomas Hauser. He played the first game I ever went to. He scored twice that day. Thomas Hauser's somebody who will always bring a smile to my face. But I seem to remember him not being a joke figure as such, but there used to be a few daft one-liners about the German sub, and the way fans spoke about him on the terraces when I was first going to games has never really matched up with how Denis Smith spoke about him. Is that fair? Or have I just got that wrong in my mind?
He had a tough time, didn't he, when he first came? And I think when you are coming from, I think he was playing in Switzerland, wasn't he, for young boys? And the physicality of the second division, I think, took him by surprise. Even though he was a tall striker, he wasn't you were talking about Billy Whitehurst last week, that physical presence. He wasn't a physical presence up front in the same respect as Whitehurst was he? So I think it did take him a little while to acclimatise to English football.
Yeah.
And then you've got this issue of him coming over, learning the language, all that sort of stuff. Then you've got the injuries. And he's trying to settle in, get the injuries out the way and get fit. And he never seemed, all through his time at Sunderland, he never seemed to have a good run where he was fit for 4 or 5 months. I think that really held him back.
Yeah, I agree with that. That he just never got a clear run and a clear chance to establish himself in the team. And I think you're right, Andrew. I don't joke. I don't know. I think we'd spent some money on him, and I think you could see what Smith was doing, bigging him up. But he wasn't just bigging the player up; he was bigging him up the fans. And then we're looking at this lad on the pitch, and he's not quite firing off every cylinder, and he's not quite. You could see that there was for me, what you could see was the part. If Smith was looking for a partnership with Gabbiadini, the evidence of that working, was spasmodic at best. I would say, and that was to do with Hauser's sort of run of games and his availability. And I think he was a tall lad, but he was quite an elegant he's almost an elegant, tall centre forward. It was an interesting time on the terraces with Hauser, because the other thing I'm going to say to you is he was German, and I can tell you, in front of me on the terraces there were older lads the older boys that still had it in for the Germans,
Yeah.
and the beat where they're always beaten where and he's German, and what's all this about German players, So I'm not saying the majority of the support, but certainly some of the support and vocal element weren't that fussed about there being a German player in the team at the time. But I just thought my memory of that is he just never got a clear run. He'd play, he'd do something in a game, he'd score a goal, he'd play a canny game, and then he'd be missing the next week, or and just he never really got going. Was my reading of that.
I wonder then, were all of these injuries because he was in a division that his body wasn't used to? He was being he was being put through his paces in a completely different way, so his body was breaking down a lot more often because it just wasn't used to the style of football in second division England at the time. So I wonder if that was one of the reasons. Because, yeah, you're right, it was very stop-start for him. It was very in and out of the team. He had a couple of really nasty injuries as well at various points. And the talking about Denis Smith there and how Denis Smith used to big him up, I dare say as well, there's an element of self-preservation there. If he spent a lot of money on a striker, an unknown player, he's not going to start ripping him to shreds in the press early doors.
That's right. That's right. And he did have a good strike record in Swiss football. He was certainly better than a 1-4 striker, probably a 1-3 striker in Swiss football. So you're looking at somebody who has scored goals, and Denis Smith's obviously spent a lot of money on him, as you say. And we talked about the Tony Norman transfer, didn't we? And that willingness, I think, for Smith to buy players who the club could develop and then potentially sell on. Bob Murray had seen him invest 80 grand into Marco and turn him into a 1 million, 2 million quid player. So there probably was that bit of self-preservation, Andrew, in terms of Smith wanting to protect his reputation in the transfer market as well as anything else. But he's getting frustrated in this pre-season. He's seen Hauser struggle through pre-season with a hamstring injury. And there was an open day at ROKER Park, and Hauser begins to train, and within 30 seconds he's done in front of all the fans. He said, Thomas said he was all right yesterday. He went through the warm-up without any trouble. It lasted only about 30 seconds of the five-a-side match. I was looking for Hauser and Warren Hawke to have pushed the other two, i.e. Gates and Gabbiadini, but that won't be happening now. And Warren Hawke's broken the toe. So Hawke and Hauser were the two strikers that Denis Smith wanted to put a bit of pressure on Gates and Gabbiadini, and both of them are injured in pre-season. And at this point, Denis Smith is not expecting them to be fit for the opening game of the season at Swindon. And Hauser's, again, been talked about all the way along here during the summer. Denis Smith keeps talking about Hauser as being, you're going to expect him to be lined up alongside Marco, and Eric Gates to play a bit part role. But of course, when the season starts, Hauser's injured. Gates and Gabbiadini start the season up front together, and 18 minutes into the first game of the season against Swindon, Eric Gates scores to put us 1-0 up. Warren Hawke, who's obviously recovers from his broken toe, comes off the bench and gets his first goal for the club as well. So he's seen a little bit of light there, I guess, as Denis, hasn't he? He's seen as two of the strikers, and obviously you can pretty much hang your hat on Marco at this point. He's seen two of his strikers score in the opening game of the season. But you look at that summer, and Denis Smith spent 130 grand on Paul Hardiman, and that was it during the summer. He did not have anything to spend, really. So again, with that 200 grand he put out for Hauser in the February, he is going to keep saying, he'll come good. He'll be fine. He's just got to get used to X, Y, and Z. He's got to get over his injuries, because there will be a bit of scrutiny there from the boardroom at the very least about where that money's been spent, won't there?
Of course, no chairman or director is happy about spending money. They're going to want to see results straight away. I liked when you said there that Warren Hawke had recovered from his broken toe. Sadly, back in those days, I don't think you did recover. I think you just got given a pain-killing injection and got told, get back out there. Yeah. I don't care how bad your foot is, you're playing.
Strap it up and cut the boot.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like Porterfield played with, couple of decades before. One question I was going to ask, because I do feel it impacts on this season. When did Paul Bracewell sign for us?
So Paul Bracewell signed very early on. So after the Swindon game, we played Ipswich, obviously Eric Gates' former club at ROKER Park. And again, for Denis Smith wanting to get the season off to a good start, a good away win at Swindon to kick it off with. We play against Ipswich on a Tuesday night at ROKER. Within 20-odd minutes, we're 3-0 down. And it's kind of not looking good. I remember this game vividly, and it was just one of those games where Ipswich kept attacking and scoring. You think, bloody hell. We managed to shore it up a little bit. Eric Gates gets one back against his former club after half-time. We end up losing 2-1. Gabbiadini gets the other goal on the night. So I end up losing 4-2. And you're kind of looking at the season going, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with these strikers? Because is it actually the strikers that we need to be focusing on, or is elsewhere on the pitch? Tony Cullen had played in that game. Say Hardiman being the only signing during the summer. And then Kelvin in that gap between the Ipswich game and the next game, which was Middlesbrough, a lunchtime kickoff on the Sunday. Paul Bracewell arrived back from Everton on loan. Now, this was a massive signing. Paul Bracewell had obviously had links with the club before. He'd been injured at Everton for a while. He struggled with injury, but he'd come back the previous season. He'd started in the FA Cup final only 3 months earlier. And we managed to get Bracewell back to ROKER Park. Obviously, Denis Smith had connections with him at Stoke. But Kelvin, that was a massive signing for us, wasn't it? Obviously, he'd impressed and done very well in the season earlier in the decade at ROKER. But to get Bracewell back, and even though he was a bit injury, he wasn't injury prone, but he was struggling with injuries. You could see he had a lasting impact with the injuries he'd suffered. But he's 27 years old. He's still in the prime of his career. And he made such a difference, didn't he?
And, it wasn't sort of rabid excitement, but there was a lot of chuffed fans when we got him over the line and got him in. There was a lot of people who'd seen him play his first season, and I was one of them, was chuffed to bits with that. I mean, it would be an admission from me that I would probably always have Bracewell in my top. He would always be in my best ever squad, Paul Bracewell. I thought he was a fantastic midfield player.
Which version? Version 1, version 2, or version 3?
I would, and that's the issue with this, with bringing him back in, is what kind of Paul Bracewell are you going to get? I mean, I remember reading somewhere about this season that after every game he played, he sat in the dressing room with his ankle in an ice bucket after every game he played. So he wasn't firing, his body wasn't 100% fit for purpose. But I would still say to you, he was a great pickup, a great signing, and fantastic for the other. I thought it helped the team generally. I thought it really helped us establish, and Andrew made a point earlier on about, we're talking about the days where probably most managers wanted their best 11 out there week in, week out, and they would play the 90 minutes. And if the sub got on, it was because he had an injury.
Yeah.
And I think what happened when Bracewell came in, I thought him and Armstrong worked really well together. I thought it brought something to defensively to the team as well. I thought he showed we're up a little bit at the back, because one thing I liked about the team, even prior to Bracewell coming in, I would say we're midfield. We were more inclined to attack than defend. And it did used to leave us open from time to time. And that's why some of those games were so exciting. You talk about Gary Bennett being posted missing. Sometimes you'd be looking at the whole of where midfield would be in the last third of the pitch, and any team like Ipswich that day would just break on and score. So I thought he brought something to us that we needed, and I also did think that his radar was up for Gates. I really felt like he kind of had a good understanding with Gates and where he wanted the ball and where to put the ball with him. You would expect that of an experienced player like Bracewell, but I thought, for me, looking at the G-force here, I thought Bracewell, he bought something there at Gates's game that season. That was one of my observations. And you're right, he was just 27, and if he'd been fully functioning, which I don't think he was when he came back, if he'd been able, and yet you look at the games that he played, he tended to play the 90 minutes. He always stayed on the pitch. He was a real battler, but a very good player. He had everything in his armory. People used to say he was a little bit slow. I don't know what you lads think of that. I never thought that. I thought he was quick when he needed to be. He was nippy when he needed to be. And I thought he was a clever, studious kind of player in terms of challenges that he needed to make, and really good on the ball. Very good on the ball.
He's one of the best midfielders I think Sunderland have had in my time watching the club. He could do everything. And, he was never going to outrun pacey striker, was he? He was never going to win a race over 100 metres. But over 10 yards, 15 yards, he was nippy enough, he was fast enough. And his positioning was always so good. So he didn't actually need to chase back or stretch, because he could just, he was in the right position to pick up the ball. He could almost read where it was going to go. And he could look after the ball beautifully. So it's really interesting point. I hadn't considered that before in terms of Bracewell's impact on Gates and therefore Gabbiadini, because they had struggled when they were together the previous season in the second division. This season, for 3 or 4 months at the very least, they are absolutely firing on all cylinders, and it coincides with Bracewell's reintroduction to the club that form happens. But Denis Smith says after the Middlesbrough game, Bracewell makes his debut, win 2-1. That gives us 6 out of 9 from the opening 3 games, which isn't too bad, really, all things considered. And Denis Smith has said, we are an entertaining side. We try to get people forward and try to make the game attractive. Unfortunately, at times it opens you up at the back, and that kind of reflects, Kelvin, what you were saying just a moment ago about the style of play that we had and the risk of that, because it's like we saw it a couple of games for Sunderland this season, wasn't it? The Aston Villa game, where we tried to go forward a lot more in attack, and you leave holes at the back, and good teams that exploit it. And on that night, the ROKER Ipswich did that. At this
great
point,
isn't it? It's
well,
great to watch.
You and I have slightly different views on what makes a good game of football. What makes a good game of football for me is Sunderland winning, and I don't really care how. But there you go. After the Middlesbrough game, Thomas Howes is back in training. He's going to play for the reserves. And again, Denis Smith saying he's been looking sharp. He's getting close to match fitness. If he gets through the reserve game, let's hope he does the business at West Brom, I think, on the following game. He's also talking about Kieran Brady, who Brady had been introduced quite heavily during pre-season, played quite a big part in pre-season, but he hadn't made the team or the subs bench so far. And Denis Smith had said the timing isn't quite right for Kieran. He's still learning his trade. He's doing very well and we're pleased with him. He's coming on at the rate we'd like him, but we won't sling him into the first team until the time is right. Which again, you've got this really good attacking player, really promising attacking player who's impressed all ends up in the reserves and youth teams. And Denis Smith's kind of just holding them back. Ricardo Gabbiadini is another name who got a bit of action during the pre-season in the first team, but hadn't got a look in so far in the league. Now, we actually continue that good form. We draw away at West Brom. That was a game that ended 1-1. I don't know if you can remember who scored the West Brom goal on that occasion.
Was
it
that
Goodman?
Don Goodman scored on 84 minutes and Marco equalised in the very last minute. Now, who was the West Bromwich Albion goalkeeper that Marco equalised against?
I think I know this. Kelvin, do you want to have a stab at it?
No, go on.
Was it Colin West?
It was Colin West. Colin West had gone in goal for West Brom from the 25th minute. It was Colin West and Don Goodman with the strike pairing for West Brom on that day. I say Colin West went in goal when Paul Bradshaw, the West Brom goalkeeper, got injured and he played 75 minutes and only conceded at the very last moment. The following weekend, we beat Watford 4-0 and Marco got a hat-trick. Tony Norman got injured at West Brom, I think, as well. Although he'd stayed in the pitch, but subsequently he got injured. He actually missed quite a big chunk of this season. Tim Carter came in goal for the Watford game. Marco scored 3 goals past a future Sunderland goalkeeper on this occasion. If either of you can remember. This is getting like on this week, isn't it? With a few random questions about lineups thrown in. Glenn Roeder was at the back for Watford. And Paul Wilkinson, who went on to play for Borough, was up front. Gary Porter was in midfield. Yes, there's a familiar name in goal.
Tony Corton?
Tony Corton was in goal for Watford on that afternoon. But Marco got a hat-trick. He didn't get sent off for smacking anybody after completing it, so that was good. And, you're looking for little marks of improvement, and that was it. It was pointed that we were going in the right direction. He managed to stay in the field rather than seeing red for scoring his second hat-trick. We drew away at Blackburn, and then we played Fulham in the league, took cup tie at Roker Park. This was a 2-legged cup tie. And Marco sat this one out, and Thomas Hauser was given his chance. He'd been coming back to fitness, played a few reserve games. I think he'd done all right in the reserve. Denis Smith put him in. Everyone's thinking, look, this is a great chance for Thomas Hauser. He's playing alongside Eric Gates on this occasion. I don't know if I do remember this game. I remember standing in the paddocks in the main stand towards the Fulwell end, because on 55 minutes, Thomas Hauser had a bit of a set two with a Fulham centre-half called Gavin Nebling. And I think there was headbutts exchanged and both of them got sent off. And again, you're looking at things that sort of stop Hauser's career really developing. Anyway, he's still only been at the club for, 7 months? But he's had a bit of a torrid time with injuries, kept picking up little niggles, gets back to fitness, gets his chance, lays a nut on somebody out for 3 games. And you're looking at, stars aligning or misaligning, and you kind of think things weren't ever destined for him to really succeed.
When Denis told him to use his head, he probably should have gone into detail there about what he meant about that.
I got lost in translation, mightn't it?
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah.
So that game ended 1-1. Paul Hardman scored a penalty to equalise Fulham's opener. I think Fulham were in the league below us on that occasion. Clive Walker was in the Fulham team on that evening. But Marco came back into the side the following game. That was a home derby draw against Newcastle that ended 0-0. And once again, that was all set up as, Mick Quinn versus Marco. Newcastle had just been relegated, I think, hadn't they? Mickey Quinn and Mark McGee had been signed at St. James's to form their strike force. And all the talk in the press, if you remember, was all about who had the best strike force, whether it was Gates and Gabbiadini or Mark McGee and Mickey Quinn. I think McGee and Quinn had started the season off like a house on fire. They got a boatload of goals. So we kept them quiet on this occasion. Neither of the strike forces managed to breach the defences on that occasion. But you look at our results that we clocked up in this stage of the season. We beat Leicester away 3-2. Neither of the two strikers were on target there, but Gordon Armstrong scored a good goal and did a moonwalk celebration to top it all off, which was certainly of its time. We drew 1-1 against Sheffield United, beat Bournemouth 3-2. We had a couple of dodgy results. I think we got turned over 5-0 at Leeds. But by the time you get to the sort of Christmas period, we're sitting fourth in the table. Eric Gates has scored 9 goals. Marco's already got 16 by the end of the year. We've got through the quarterfinals of the League Cup. We've obviously got through that Fulham tie in the second leg. We've got through a Bournemouth replay to get through. We beat Exeter after drawing 2-2 and rescuing that game down at their place, and John Kay and some friends having a look at some local car dealerships. And you get into the turn of the year. And actually, sorry, we were third. By the end of the year, we're third in the league table. The two strikers are firing on all cylinders. Here they've got 25 goals between them by the end of December. And Eric Gates is actually really surprised at how much football he's had. You know, he was talking about the partnership that he had with Marco, and he's, you know, whether he's reconsidering his decision to retire at this point or not, I don't know. But he's saying the manager may be able to sign better players, but as a pair, so he's talking about him and Marco, as a pair, he might have to spend $2 million to do so, to get anybody, any partnership to do as well as we do. I just wish I was 5 years younger to save him the bother of looking. The partnership with Marco just seemed to click from the start. We did well in the third division. When the goals didn't come early on, when we won promotion, the manager went out and bought Billy Whitehurst. We didn't play that many games together last season. When we did, Marco got 11 goals in 18, and I managed 3. I didn't expect to play as many matches this season, but I got my chance at the start. I like to think we've done reasonably well. And he's talking about the prospect of promotion. I'm surprised at how well we've done so far. I thought we'd be a mid-table side, but there's no reason why we can't at least make the playoffs. We're a top 6 side. So again, it's interesting in terms of the candidness of some of the interviews around that time. You certainly wouldn't get Granite Xhaka saying, I'm surprised we finished in Europe. I thought we wouldn't be struggling against relegation this season. I thought we were a mid-table side. But yeah, Casey's a little bit surprised. And Andrew, it's interesting how the season progresses, isn't it now? Because that first chunk of the season, from the August to the December, if you look back at the uncertainty about the strike partnerships and the players Denis Smith was looking at, that season started off incredibly well, considering the come up from the third division, had a all right, but up and down season the following year. This season we've started off fantastically.
It was a really strong start. I think Bracewell coming along helped with that. When you were discussing Bracewell, it struck me though, we're signing a player of that calibre on loan originally, which is just further proof to me, at least, that Denis Smith doesn't have the type of money available to him. He needs to see a player first to be sure before forking out for him. So money is a consideration throughout. Form is good, but we have a tendency to look back on things and we see it's a promoted season and you just assume, oh, we must have been fantastic throughout. But there were the odd duff result. Like you say, we got beat heavily by Leeds. Yeah, got beat heavily. I can't think of too many trips to Welland Road that have been described as heavenly. Although in our defence, I think Leeds must have been promoted that season. Have I got my... No, they weren't.
No, they were, because I remember we played them at home. Remember John Kay and Red and White Tractor?
Yes. So the team's not quite there yet. Eric Gates's comments about, I only wish I was 5 years younger. Well, when you were 5 years younger, Gatesy, I hate to remind you, but Sunderland wanted rid of you because you were costing them too much in wages. So Denis Smith's probably thinking, if you were 5 years younger, I might have had a bit of resale value. I might have got some money in for you. But yes, results are going the right way, and you're starting to see a team coming together, it ends well. But I think I'm right in saying that between now and promotion, it's not all plain sailing, is it?
It's not. And the first game of the new year, so 1st of January 1990, we play Hull away from home. We get beat 3-2. Thomas Howard's actually on the score sheet. He comes on as a sub for Eric Gates. We're 2-0 down. Howard comes on, gets a goal within 6 minutes of being on the field. We ended up getting beat 3-2, though. As I say, Ian Hesford actually saved a penalty from Gordon Armstrong in this game. Ian Hesford's in goal for Hull, and Tony Yeoman's back in the side and returning back to Boothby Park. And this sets us off on a really bad run, Kelvin. We play Middlesbrough in the next game. We get turned over 3-0 at Ayresome Park. Peter Davenport's on the score sheet, which is interesting because he didn't score many goals for the Borough, but Colin Cooper, Tony Mowbray, Mark Proctor, as well as Davenport are all in the Borough side on that occasion. Thomas Hauser comes off the bench at half-time in that game. Eric Gates actually left on the bench as a sub. So he's dropped Gates. I remember he kind of went to a 5 at the back for this game. Paul Hardiman wore the number 9 shirt, which was an unusual thing. We drew 1-1 at home at West Brom, drew 1-1 away at Newcastle, got beat off Blackburn, drew against Watford, got beat at Plymouth, drew against Leicester at home. I think we'd won 3-10, which for a side that was in such good form, we were in such a good position in the league table, we were 3rd at the turn of the year. It started to get people a little concerned, and this run has dropped us down to, I think, 7th or 8th in the league. And Kelvin, when it's natural. It's always natural, isn't it, when you have a team going through that run of results, no matter what's happened beforehand, people start to question things. And, some of the sentiment in the Echo letters pages, which we've dug through, people are saying, we need to sign a good striker to share the workload with Gabbiadini. Let us see some decent football. As a totally disillusioned Sunderland fan, I'd like to question Denis Smith's performance with regards to man management, tactical know-how, team selection, transfer activity, and discipline. It's everything covered there. It's a full bingo card, isn't it?
Other than that, he's doing a canny job.
Other than that, he's doing all right.
Yeah.
It just goes to show it doesn't take long. It doesn't take that many results for people to start questioning what's going on. And look, whether this, it's been really interesting actually going through these 3 seasons, hasn't it? Because around the same time in each season, form's dipped and people haven't been slow to ask questions about Denis Smith and the job he's doing. We saw it in the 3rd division season, and then there was a flurry of transfer rumours and activity. We saw it in the 88-89 season once again, flurry of transfer rumours and activity. And again, this season, and it's a funny one when you look back, because we know what happened at the end of the season. To look back and see this discontent, isn't it?
And I think for me, I had always remembered that in my head, that period round about the Christmas time and just after it. In it does show you what your memory does. I'd remembered that in my head is Gates was missing for a lot of them games, and I'd thought that he was injured. But I will. You've mentioned that he was dropped, and I can see that he was. I've just looked at a couple of stats on games there, and that he was on the bench for some of those games as well. But him, if you look at the games that he's not playing, sort of coincides with the run of bad results, but it is round about the Christmas period. And as you say, these 3 seasons have seen this dip round about the Christmas period. And if you widen your lens on that, I wonder, he's got his best 11 probably. He might have 12 he probably wants Hauser in there, but has he got much more past that? Or is there anybody else banging on the door to say, I want a game, I deserve a game, put me in, boss? I'm thinking about Colin West now. Put me in, boss, and I'll get the goals for you. The squad looks a bit thin on paper, and yet he himself, he talks about, I'm sure he was like talking at the start of the season. You might have mentioned that about some of the younger players that were around at that point. Now, I saw the youth team, the young lads playing just a little bit that season, and definitely the likes of Brady, Rush, Hawke. I thought these were good lads. I thought we had a canny team coming up. I remember the lad of Smith. I always forget his name because we had about
Anthony
three of
Smith.
them at the time, didn't we? And I thought we had some good young players coming up, but it's not reflected. That if you look at the team that he's picking at that time in that difficult period from Christmas, it's not really reflected in the team, is it? I
No.
think some of that's to do with the size of the squad and the caliber of players that he can bring in when people lose form or are injured. That's what I think some of that's about. But you're right, it wasn't plain sailing. And if you'd said at the end of January, I think we're going to go up, I think people standing on the terraces, at least around me, at that point would have said, and I think you're talking out your backside. We are what Eric said we are. We look like a mid-table team to me, for sure.
You talk about the size of the squad and we're trying to think of potential reasons for a dip in form. That season, if you look at it, it's a pretty packed schedule. Martin, you mentioned a couple of cup replays. That was it the Rumbelows Cup back then or the Littlewoods Cup?
Littlewoods, I reckon.
Littlewoods. It was the League Cup, certainly. We were also in, again, I want to say Zenith Data, but that might not have been the name of the tournament. So there was a heavy fixture schedule, so that added to the size of the squad, and as you've said, Kelvin, maybe not too much in terms of depth. That might have impacted on the form and the results because the players are exhausted at the time. Just going back to that letters page correspondent, Martin, and what was he called? Disgruntled or disillusioned? Disillusioned, wasn't he?
He was very disillusioned.
Yeah, that is only 2 years after what was our lowest ever point in the football pyramid at that point. Now, if he was disillusioned then, I don't think he would have liked some of the League One years when we went back to that level.
But, again, you look at this season at Sunderland, after that 5-0 against Nottingham Forest, so you read and some people go, it's the worst result we've ever had, and it's like, no.
Aye, it's staggering. It just really strikes me, though, that, the team were going through a sticky patch, but if you compare that version of Sunderland in the second tier to the last one when Gates was first in the group, you can at least see the shoots of recovery in the club. It's not perfect, but we're going somewhere in the right direction at least.
No, that's absolutely right. Just a couple of things before we take a very short break. Gordon Armstrong was one of the players who was never present that season. He started every single game that season. He was only subbed twice. Either you want to hazard a guess as how many games Gordon Armstrong played in the 89-90 season?
I think it's 50 plus, isn't it? 50 plus.
59 games.
Yeah.
59 games he started that season. And he had a breather in 2.
Do you reckon next year, if the players are complaining about Europa League, Gordon Armstrong's going to be sat there just thinking, boys, you don't know you're born.
Go and have a word with Gordon. He'll sort you out. bit of perspective for you there. And Kelvin, speaking to your point about the depth of the squad, I'd never considered it before, really, looking at the team that we had then. When you look at the bench that we had, there's only really Thomas Hauser and Ruben Agbula who we can make a case for starting games, really. The rest of the players who were on the bench at that time are either young lads. Mickey Heathcote's on the bench, Tony Cullen's on the bench, David Rush is on the bench now again, Warren Hawke, John Cornforth was on the bench on the opening game of the season. Kieran Brady comes onto the bench a little bit later on. But, you've got young lads. So you've pretty much got 13 players and some young lads dotted around, haven't you? So, the players have to play. And, after that packed Christmas schedule, which we all love as fans, but I don't think the players love it as much. That dip in form is maybe a consequence of having that smaller squad. We will take a very short break there and be back after a couple of ads.
Imagine buying your kid a toy only to find the batteries aren't included, or buying furniture but missing the tools to build it. Frustrating, right? Now imagine the exact same feeling, but you're paying way more. That is what buying business software usually feels like. Fragmented, disconnected, and incredibly expensive. Odoo completely changes that. Odoo is a complete, fully integrated business suite where all your apps actually talk to each other. We're talking automated lead routing for your sales team, seamless AI integration, and intuitive point-and-click website builder. It's everything your business needs to scale, saving you time, headaches, and money. Stop piecing your software together. Go to odoo.com. That's odoo.com to learn more.
Marvel Television's Wonder Man, an 8-episode series, now streaming on Disney+.
A superhero remake, not exactly what we'd expect from an Oscar-winning director.
Action! Simon Williams, audition for Wonder Man.
I'm gonna need you to sign this, assuming you don't have superpowers.
I'll never work again if anyone found out.
My lips are sealed.
Marvel Television's Wonder Man. All 8 episodes now streaming, only on Disney+.
LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't predict the future, but it can help you feel confident about future hires. Because Hiring Pro combines real-time insights and candidate data from the LinkedIn network with the criteria you've set for your role to deliver you a list of top-fit candidates. Businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Welcome back to How We're the podcast for what promises to be the final part of our Gatesy and Gabbiadini deep dive. I am going to stick to that, but we'll see where we get to in the second half of this show. Now, we are into February, and as we were talking about before the break, the results aren't going too well. I have had a bit of a dip post-Christmas, and I'm not sure if Denis Smith had a reminder in his calendar to do this every February or March, but he was once again linked with John Byrne. He was trying to get John Byrne to come and play alongside Marco to give the forward line a little bit of a boost. Now, this is really interesting, again, in the context of what happened at the end of the season. Obviously, we go up and then we play First Division football next season. At this point, Denis Smith is talking about needing things to change. And he's talking about needing to maybe sacrifice somebody in order to bring in some new players. He was given a bit of money for Paul Bracewell, but originally Bracewell was signed on loan. And I don't know if you remember this, and obviously we were talking about Bracewell coming to the club in the first part of this pod. He signed on loan from Everton for a month. We wanted to extend it for another couple of months, because I think you could have it up to 3 months. Newcastle wanted to sign him. Newcastle made a bid for him, which forced Bob Murray's hand to a large extent to give Smith some money to actually complete the deal. So he was given 250 grand in September to complete the Bracewell deal. And now the coffers are empty. There's no money there for Smith to spend. So he knows he's going to have to maybe sacrifice somebody to spend some money. And Denis Smith said in February, I know the club needs a bit of a shake-up. I've always said I won't part with the better players, but now I may have to consider it. In this press report, he's not only linked with John Byrne, who's now at Le Havre in France after leaving QPR the end of that last season. He's linked with Brian Mooney, who he eventually did get the season after. He was at Preston. And he was also linked with Dave Bennett, Gary's brother, who was at Sheffield Wednesday. So you can see where he's wanting to strengthen. He's wanting to strengthen in those forward positions, but particularly on the right-hand side with the links to Mooney and to Dave Bennett. The day after these press reports emerge about him maybe selling somebody and needing to buy, Thomas Hauser is once again injured or ill or both. Because he said Denis had been working on a few new tactics involving Thomas Hauser in training, but the big West German twisted his ankle and was also sent home with a temperature of 102 degrees. Now, presumably that's Fahrenheit, but you never know. Denis said that just about sums it up. It would be lovely to have a settled side. He actually did have a settled side. He only had 40 players to choose from, but he couldn't quite get Hauser fit, could he? And he couldn't quite get Hauser having a spell in the team. And it was really unfortunate for Hauser at this point because just before Christmas, Gatesy and Gabbiadini were in great goal scoring form. They'd scored 25 goals between them. Hauser had also scored a few goals. He'd come off the bench in 3 games in quick succession and scored goals. He'd come off the bench against Swindon at home, Port Vale at home, I think equalising goals on both occasions. And he'd scored in that game at Hull that we talked about earlier. So Hauser's getting a bit of form. He's fit. He's putting some pressure on Gates and Gabbiadini, or more specifically Gates. But again, he just keeps picking up these injuries. But then he's recovered from his little ankle knock, and he's recovered from his temperature. And he's going into this game against Brighton. Now, Thomas Hauser had played the week before against Watford and played really well. He'd scored a goal to put Sunderland in the lead. I think we drew 1-1 in that game. And Denis Smith's looking at this as a bit of a turning point for Hauser. He's thinking this can be a new chapter in Hauser's career at Sunderland. He's saying, I'm sure if the match had been at ROKER Park, Thomas would have won the fans over. So Smith's talking about it being difficult for Hauser in terms of the fans at ROKER, as well as the other things that we've talked about, his injuries and whatnot. He has not had the opportunity to do it, but Saturday's performance could not have done him any harm. He was in the side for the first time this season on merit. So again, he's dropped Gates because Hauser's obviously impressed in training in the reserves. And then said, and the fact he was selected would have made him feel better about himself. It's very early days. I was very pleased with him. And if he continues with performances like that, he will cause people problems. He has been criticised for not scoring shortly after he put us in front. That's against Watford. Ask any professional and they will tell you he did everything right. He hit the ball first time when he was under pressure and the lads were convinced that the defender was behind the line and also handled to prevent the goal. So there was a bit of controversy in that game. Thomas had another chance in the second half where Marco had crossed it for him and he just failed to get there. But Hauser's coming into a bit of form. Denis Smith was once again, and you can look at the rationale behind Smith's backing of him. But he's played in this game at Watford, played really, really well. And Andrew, he comes into the team again at ROKER Park against Brighton and Hove Albion, which is a game I know that you remember pretty well. And he does all right, doesn't he?
Aye, not bad. And if he hadn't scored those 2 goals, I might have gone away from my first game thinking, I'm not bothered with this football lark. So Thomas Hauser, bless him, has got a lot to answer for. They were both poachers finishers as well. They were like, maybe you could even say Eric Gates type finishes, kind of just finding himself in the box, picking up the scraps and putting it away. So there was clearly something there. And you can understand why Smith was keen to give him every opportunity to show it. But you can start to sense in Smith's comments that even he's getting a little frustrated with the injuries and the high temperatures and everything else. Hauser himself by this stage is perhaps thinking, what have I got to do? I'll score 2 goals and it's still not enough. There's always something else that means I'm going to drop out of the team. It must have been a difficult position for him. And as well, you're going to be frustrated if your body is letting you down. You're in a new country. People don't know what you're about. You're not going to like this idea that everybody just assumes you're a sick note. Yeah. So he's not going to be feeling too good, bless him. And the frustration is that, when he does have an opportunity, he scored a couple of goals and gives you an indication that he's got something about him. So it's frustrating. And as well, when you're injured, you don't want to be picking up the papers saying that the manager's looking at bringing in other players. You mentioned the links we'd had there. So, bless him.
It doesn't help, Kelvin, does it? Sorry, Kelvin. It doesn't help when somebody in the full well end's calling them shithouser, though, does it?
Okay, well, just to clarify, that wasn't me, but I did think it was an amusing comment from my younger brother. Well, I'm going to blame him for that. When you look at Houser's record that season, you know, you might tell us I'm wrong here. I have him as he started 6 games, and he came on. He was sub for in 13 is what I had, give or take a game or two. But he started 6 games, he scored 6 goals. So it's not bad. That it's just you want them starting 16, 26 games, don't you?
Well,
not 6.
And it's those games in a row as well, isn't it? You look at his overall record for Sunderland.
Yep.
He only started 26 games and he scored 11 goals.
Yeah.
So you're not talking like somebody's played 26 games and got 1 or 2. He's got almost 1 and 2 games per goals. Certainly better than a 1 and 3 striker. So in terms of goal scoring, he probably gets a bad rap, I reckon.
I think that's what I'm saying to you as well in terms of my own view of him, in looking in a bit more detail at what's gone on the seasons that he's with us. I'm sort of revising the opinion of him, and especially and I mean, I know I said this in, I think it was the first pod, when you look at the players that Denis Smith bought. He wasn't a bloke that went out and made bad signings, was he?
No, that's right. But more often than not, he got the signings right, didn't he? And he's trying again to get players in before the transfer deadline. This was when the transfer deadline was towards the end of March. It was the 3rd Thursday in March, and you had to drive paperwork down to the Lytham St Anne's or something, didn't you, to the headquarters of the Football League or wherever it was to get somebody in. But 2 weeks before this transfer deadline this season, newspapers are full of, Denis Smith is desperately trying to bring in a goal scorer. So once again, he's trying to add something to the attack to get Sunderland's playoff place solidified, really. That was the biggest hope for the season. Now, on the 20th of March, after all of Eric Gates's talk about absolutely retiring at the end of the season, no question, final word, I am retiring at the end of the season, Eric Gates decides not to retire at the end of the season. So he puts a little bit of a spanner in the works for Denis Smith, because he's obviously enjoyed the season a lot. He's scored some goals. And he says, I've always said I would retire at 35, but if I can get fixed up with a North East club, or even better, if I can stay at Sunderland and they want me for another season, I'll be delighted to continue playing. So he's quite happy to continue for another season. Maybe he's looking at boosting his pension that he's obviously quite fixed upon or whatever, but he's determined to stay in the North East. And again, like we were talking about when he was transfer listed at the end of the 86-87 season, he'd come back home after being down in Ipswich for so many years. He wanted to stay in the North East. And apparently Blackpool had been linked with him. Darlington had been linked with him. But he said, if some club like Swansea came in for me, I wouldn't be interested. I'm not sure where he's plucked Swansea from. I don't know what Swansea have done to offend him, but he doesn't want to go to Wales. He said, but Darlington's only 10 miles down the road from where I live. And I know Brian Little and Frank Gray very well. I'm not saying that I am the player I was, but I still have got my enthusiasm, and perhaps the rest over the last few weeks has done me good. The last few weeks have been a big disappointment. I trained with the first team again yesterday, and I just hope I'm back in the side tonight. This is on the eve of us playing Leeds at ROKER Park. Thomas Houser's obviously been in the side with Eric Gates being injured. He says, I think Sunderland still have a good chance as any other club of reaching the playoffs. I would love to be involved for the last dozen games. If the club comes along and says they want me to stay, that would be brilliant. I would be delighted if an offer comes along. So, Andrew, he's certainly changed his tune, and he's kind of put the ball back in Denis Smith's court, hasn't he? He's got a striker who's playing well. He's missed a few games through injury, and the team suffered as a result. Maybe he thinks he's in a good bargaining position to get another couple of years contract or another season. Or maybe he's just loved the season so much. He's had a first team place and he's enjoyed playing. He's been scoring goals. The results have been all right. He just wants to continue.
He'd be good on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, wouldn't he? Is that your final answer?
One of the things I wonder about Gatesy when he's saying that he'll play another season, in the back of his head, is he thinking that Sunderland will be in the second division for another season as well, and thinking that I could manage this. I could do that if we're a mid-table club. I just wonder about that and him changing his mind, because he seemed so definite I can remember the newspaper report at the time as the season was starting. And I remember reading that and rolling up to the first game I went to see and thinking, well, this is our last season of Gatesy. We're not going to be seeing him anymore. We should enjoy him.
Well, I think that's a fair point. He might be looking down the line, and there's a bit of guesswork as to where Sunderland are going to be. Also, we keep talking about this. It's how Hauser gets spoken up a lot in the press. Other players might get a bit of a lip on about that. Eric Gates could be within his rights to say, "Oh, I'm sick of you, boss, just praising Thomas Hauser every opportunity you get." For all we know, he might see Hauser's presence as a good thing and think, "Oh, okay, well, the gaffer wants Gabbiadini and Hauser as the front two. I've got enough of my legs to just be the support, to just be the backup to that." So again, maybe he's changing from, I can't start 35 games in a season, but I could still do a job. The Hauser's presence probably does have a bearing on it. What really interests me about Hauser, Kelvin, when you looked at his stats and you said 6 starts, 12 subs or whatever it was, and 6 goals. If you just looked at the record books and you didn't know all of the talk about the manager desperately trying to get him back in the team and big him up, you would assume that Hauser's role had always just been as a handy backup player. If you fast forward to Peter Reid's time when we got promoted with 105 points, everybody spoke about about Phillips and Quinn being the starters. And sorry, Martin, I'm going to mention him. Danny Dicchio and Michael Bridges were the clear backups. So any goals they scored were a bonus.
Yeah.
So Hauser's role in everything is a factor, and he's always there in the conversation about the G-Force. It's nice when Martin reminds me of back in the day, there used to be a transfer deadline day in March. When Sunderland had their rocky patch after Christmas and it goes on into February, you could have people writing into the paper saying, well, now's the time to go into the transfer market. We don't have that luxury now, do we?
No, that's right.
Just coming back to one thing as well about the way that season went, as a couple of the previous seasons had gone the dip in form over the Christmas period. In Denis Smith's defence, one of the things I would say would be, and one of the factors would be the state of pitches during those cloggy winter months, and the type of football that he was trying to get us to play.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep.
And I think he liked the ball to be on the deck. We had players that liked the ball on the deck, and we just couldn't play that fast, zippy football that when we were flying, the ball's zipping about the place and it's moving from the wing, the midfield. It's moving at pace up front, and you can't really do that on a claggy pitch at Ewood Park in the winter months. I remember seeing that game down there in that season, and man, every time we hit the ball, it was like it was just holding up in the mud. You had to get it off the ground to get it to go anywhere, and it wasn't particularly enjoyable, that. So you could see why, as well, why he wanted a target man, he wanted a big lad, so that we had that option of getting the ball up, booting the ball up. I'd say there's a great science to this, isn't there? Get that ball hoofed up the park, and get the big lad on it, and see if we can get a knockdown off him, Gatesy and Gabbiadini up front, you're never really gonna get that out of them. Although Gabbiadini was better in the air than what many of us would have appreciated. I thought he was deceptively good in the air, and I'm not talking about just headed goals. I'm talking about challenging and getting knockdowns. I thought he had something there that belied his height, for want of a better point. So that winter month dip was something. If I'd been Denis Smith, I would have been frustrated at the fact that our form's going to dip and we haven't got the players that can play those winter pitches, So there was something there to factor into that dip. But you've got to you've got to play with the cards you've got. And that I think was part of his frustration and ours. I mean, it could be frustrating at that time. I'm not saying I'd be writing into the papers as Mr. Angry from Selkirk and the Scottish borders, but there were definitely games where you think, for Christ's sake, man, come on, lads, you're better than this,
Yeah.
But the number of factors cutting across our form at that point. So what changes then? How, what would be your view on you two's view on how that season turns itself around?
Well, I can give you my view on how this season turned itself around. And again, it's a funny one when you look at the context of what we're talking about. So Gatesy comes back in for the game against Leeds at home. We get beat 1-0. He goes off, I think, with a reoccurrence of that injury. Thomas Hauser comes on for him. The next game, Gates is out. Hauser's injured once more. And Kieran Brady comes in because we're playing West Ham. And you've got this spell of results now. We go on a run of winning 4 in a row. We beat West Ham 4-3 at ROKER Park, the Kieran Brady game. We beat Bradford 1-0 down at their place, and Brady's on the score sheet once more. Sheffield United, we go to Bramall Lane, turn them over 3-1. Brady's playing brilliantly again. And we beat Stoke City at home 2-1. That gets us up to 5th. But neither Gates nor Hauser have been available. So Denis Smith's almost been forced, his hand's been forced to chuck Kieran in. And it's just that, I don't know what you think, Andrew, but it was that unpredictability, that, the abundance of, I know we talked about Kieran Brady on one of the On This Week podcast, didn't we? And unless you saw him play, you cannot describe how good he was. He could have been a global superstar if a number of things had fallen into line for him, because he had everything. But Denis Smith chucked him into those games, and that gave the fans a boost. It gave the team a boost. We were able to, we scored a few goals that we perhaps wouldn't have scored otherwise. And that just ignited something, got that momentum going again, which it kind of drifted off for that spell since January.
It had drifted and things had conspired against us. But we all know this about Sunderland. We're only one good win or one good performance from putting together a run.
Or from complete disaster. It works the other way.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. I mean, you could drop that line in to basically every ROKER Rewind pod we do from now until the end of time. We were one result away from greatness, one result away from catastrophe.
And 2 good players away from having a good team.
Yeah, well, exactly, yes, yeah. Oh, that's always the case. But yeah, we weren't bad as such. Just results weren't quite going our way, which is about right for a team who are in the near the top of the table, but aren't quite good enough to win the title, aren't quite good enough to be in the automatic promotion picture. We're there or thereabouts. And yeah, Brady coming into the team was a catalyst because, as you say, you can't underestimate just how much potential he had. We are talking about a player who could have very easily been a generational talent, and his story is connected to the G-Force and what happened in the subsequent seasons, because things could have been very different for him, very different for the club. I feel a lot of disappointment on behalf of Kieran Brady. I know nowadays he's in a good place and he does a lot of good things for the community, but that must have been very hard to be spoken about in such terms. You know, this absolutely white-hot prospect who then comes into the team and, as you've said, Martin, starts to do it. He's fulfilling that potential. It doesn't work out for him, and that is a if we want to talk about sliding doors or what if moments, that's a pod in itself.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. And when you look at this run as well that we had, Thomas Hauser, say he got left out of the team when Gates came back to fitness. He picked up a little injury that lost his place on the bench, but he's then being fit and available for selection. Denis Smith hasn't picked him. He hasn't put him back on the subs bench or in the team. We've gone on this good run, got back into the playoff spots. And after the Sheffield United game, Denis Smith's on his Thomas Hauser charm offensive again in the press. He's saying, when you have a big striker like Thomas up front, at times the easy way out is to hit long balls to him. That's not Thomas's style of play. He likes the ball at his feet and is very skillful in that department. Now, bear in mind, this is more than 12 months after he arrived at the club. Dennis has said, in a way, we have to educate our other players to play to Thomas's strengths. Now, he's had quite a bit of time to work on this, you would have thought, but it obviously hasn't clicked. Thomas Hauser says, I'm a bit worried with things at the moment. I think I played quite well when I was in the side. My goal-scoring record in the first team and the reserves is quite good. Denis Smith says, I think the lad has 8 goals in 10 games in the first team. I know he can play. There's no reason why he shouldn't have a good future at ROKER Park. If he played at home like he did in our game at Watford, I'd have been lynched for leaving him out. One of the problems is that both he and Marco like the chances to be made for them. Thomas has always been used to having chances created for him and he likes to score. But he has had to make the chances for Marco, just like Eric Gates and now Colin Pascoe would do, and that's not his style, which you'd ask questions about who was telling him that he needed to do that, but that's maybe another conversation. Both are proven goal scorers, and I hope we can harness those talents and get that right blend where they are both scoring regularly. People keep saying that's something we should be working on in training. We're trying, but the place to get it right is during a match. I thought it did all right for us up until the game at Plymouth, but it's all a learning process. We must be careful, as I don't want someone who's a good player to leave the club. So it's Denis Smith maybe protecting his reputation, protecting his interest, protecting a saleable asset for the club to a large extent. But I find it intriguing that, and again, managers are asked different questions by journalists, and obviously the people asking the questions thought there was a story in this. And there was, because we spent quite a bit of money on. But after coming off the back of a good run of form where we've won 4 games out of 4, 5 games out of 5, whatever it was, for this to still be a big talking point, it's fascinating, isn't it? Again, when you look at the G-Force as a thing, you assume that, we never had to worry about our strikers for 3 seasons. But it hasn't really been the case, has it?
That press officer, do you remember we kept talking about this? Imagine press officer. Yeah, that is yet another statement where they must have been kicking him under the desk. There's 3 or 4 things he said in there where, does it need saying as such? Maybe Denis Smith was just on a permanent wind-up. just thinking, how long can I keep this going? How long can I wind people up? That's the biggest takeaway from me out of this whole story, Martin, that if you'd had asked me, I would have said, yeah, the G-force was set in stone and everybody believed it, everybody backed it, and it was in place for years, and there were just the first names on the team sheet, job done, you never had to give it a second thought. But we are talking about the final throes of the Gates and Gabbiadini combination. We're coming towards their last season together. And yeah, my memory of it is so far from the truth. Maybe the reason he was always talking about Hauser was he did only have 14 first team members. So if you've got to come up with a story every day, maybe if you do the research on the other 13 lads, maybe just every day he rotates between them all just to give the papers something to talk about.
Tuesday is Gordon Armstrong Day.
Yeah.
Wednesday is Ruben Agboola. But I guess the pinnacle of the Gates and Gabbiadini partnership with G-Force Kelvin came a few weeks later, didn't it? Obviously, we finished 6th in the league. We played Newcastle in a two-legged semi-final for the playoffs. Drew 0-0 at ROKER Park. Paul Hardman missed a penalty in the last minute, slightly tapped John Burridge's head after Burridge saved the penalty. But Gates and Gabbiadini in that second leg at St. James's Park, that was them at the best. Gatesy gets the tap in early on. He sets Marco up for a goal to seal it. They played brilliantly all night. They caused Newcastle so many problems. And that was just, in a nutshell, everything that was brilliant about them when they were brilliant together over those 3 seasons, wasn't it?
It was interesting. It wasn't the best pitch that night. I don't know if you can think of the weather. Their pitch.
Well, there's lots of people on it, Kelvin.
Well, that doesn't help, does it? I was standing on I think I've told you before, I was on the Gallagher end that night. I didn't know whether to help people on or, say, oh, come on, you'll ruin the pitch, lads, But, sorry, I've totally lost my thread there. The night going into the game, I did wonder about the pitch prior to it, but the performance, and you have to say there, it was Gates and Gabbiadini at their best, but it was that team at its best as well. Yeah. I mean, everybody, from Johnny Kay, Gary Owers that night, Warren Hawke, what a, Smithy, I mean, give him his due. He threw Hawke into that game, and what a job he did up and down that. That lad never stopped that night, and he was an irritating little gnat when he didn't have the ball. He was at everybody, But it got, Bracewell, Armstrong, Benno and McPhail. I doubt one of the things I would say to you about that night, Bennett and McPhail, Gary Bennett wasn't on his travels that night very much. He stayed and played his position that night, and them two did really well.
He was on his travels, Kelvin, when the fans ran on the pitch. I've never seen a turn of pace like that. He was away.
He was off that pitch like a shot, and apparently got to kick up the jockey for his troubles as he was. I didn't actually see that, but what I did see was him moving. It's probably the fastest he moved all night to get off the pitch. But the whole team that night played well, and actually allowing for the weather and the pitch, we did keep the ball on the deck a bit, and the ball was moving. It was like skidding off the surface a little bit as well. But quite cleverly, what we didn't do that night, if you watch that game through, you can tell I've geeked this game backwards and forwards a few times. What we did was we quite cleverly missed the centre of the park out, because it was like a cabbage patch in the centre of the park. And I thought we really played it like round that bit almost, Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason we did that, But it was quite clever, whereas Newcastle were getting a bit bogged down, trying to come up through the middle of the park, and it was just Gates and Gabbiadini that night were just on fire. They looked, both of them looked in the fettle. And apparently, I always remember reading something in Bob Murray's book saying that, there was a lot of disappointment after the first game, where I thought it was a very even game, that at ROKER Park. If I wanted us to score that penalty in the last minute, but I would have been walking away from the game thinking, we've been a bit lucky there. We're lucky to come away with a 1-0 win. I thought it was a very even game, that game at ROKER Park, and I thought Newcastle played quite well in that game. So coming into that game at St James's, you could have forgiven people for feeling that there was we were nervous, we were worried. It's on their patch. What are they going to do to it? But when you look at our form away from home, we actually had a team that could play on the break and could play away from home. And in Gates and Gabbiadini, we had two players that were just prime. Just exactly what you needed on a night like that, and playing the way that we played. The two of them were on fire. They never stopped, the two of them either, the whole of the game. It might have been one of Gates's best ever games for us that night.
Yeah.
His touch was, in the conditions, sublime.
Did Gates win the penalty? The infamous John Burridge penalty?
It was Gabbiadini. I'm sure it was Gabbiadini. Was it not?
I think it was Marco. Was it Roy Aitken who fouled him? And it's a dubious penalty.
Is it not? I thought it was Stimson.
Yes, no, it was.
Yeah, was it not Stimson? It was a very dubious. It was a dubious penalty. Yeah,
very clear penalty given the opposition. But
just a very quick point, Martin, if you don't mind. I know I was joking about Gary Bennett racing off the pitch when the fans ran on. It has just struck me that it was only a few years after he suffered some of the worst racial abuse ever at that ground. So I can well understand if he was a little bit anxious. But if either of you get to dig out the footage of the players going up through the tunnel into the changing room at that moment, it is fantastic. And Gatesy is absolutely thrilled.
No, it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And of course, that performance led us to Wembley, didn't it? But I do think the legend of the G-Force, if you like to or want to term it like that, a lot of it is to do with that game, as well as everything that happened, because that was the last game, or second of last game that they played together for Sunderland, and they were fantastic. It just showed everything that was possible when the two of them were on the pitch together. They're absolutely superb, and of course the fact it was against Newcastle made it all the better and more important. We get to Wembley. Of course, everybody knows what happens there. Now, Eric Gates has said he's changed his mind about retiring. He said he's open to staying at Sunderland. Thomas Hauser at this point has asked for a transfer. He wants out. He's transfer listed by his own request, which, again, you don't really get players being transfer listed at their own request anymore, but back in those days he did. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting as well, because Gatesy's out of contract and a number of other players are out of contract as well. In those days, if you didn't offer a player a contract on at least the same terms as he was on, he could leave for free. Even if he didn't sign the contract, if he'd been offered terms that were the same or better than he was on previously, he could still leave, but you'd go to the tribunal and get a fee. So the club obviously thought there was no value in Gates as a 35-year-old striker in terms of somebody paying a transfer fee for him. But when you look at you look at the list of the players who they did offer contracts to, it makes you question whether Denis Smith actually knew that we were going up or not. Because there's a whole school of thought that Denis Smith let Eric Gates go in the free because he didn't think he'd be up to the rigours of the First Division football. Denis Smith actually says that in his autobiography. He says, I let Gates go because I didn't think he could do a season in the First Division. But Eric Gates left Sunderland 2 weeks before we were actually promoted by the courts. So at this point, we're looking ahead at the season in the Second Division. John McPhail, John Cornforth, Paul Lemon, Mickey Heathcote, Tony Cullen, Ricardo Gabbiadini, Martin Gray, Andrew Sams, Jonathan Trigg, Simon Guthrie, Anthony Smith and Wayne Walls are all offered terms for the next season. Some of those the club might have had high hopes for. I know some of them did play First Division football for us. There's some there that you would think, well, if Denis Smith's planning for a season in top flight, you might not be that fussed about keeping it up. But as I say, the tribunal fee does come into this, and I think that's probably a key bit. But again, 2 weeks before we're promoted, and Denis Smith might have known what was going on. Bob Murray says he did, and whether you believe Bob Murray's book or not, you can make your own mind up about that. But I think there was certainly utterances, wasn't there, in the corridors of power about Sunderland's fate for that season. But Denis says, he's said he's not offered Eric Gates a new contract. He's done superbly well for me. I couldn't have asked for any more. I'm delighted. So he says, I'm delighted I didn't listen to everything that was said about him when I first came to the club. I hope our fans remember him for what he did in those 3 years while I've been here and the enjoyment he has given them. And it's right, because those 3 seasons, when Gates was on the field, more often than not, he was exceptionally good. He then talked about Eric Gates' decision to not retire. And he said, Eric made a decision. I then had to decide on the club's progress and whether Eric could perform as well as he has done over the last 2 years. I don't think he can. So Denis Smith obviously made his mind up. He's had a little bit of time to think about it. He thought he was going to retire. He's had 2 months to think about whether Gates could perform to the same level in the Second Division, really, because he's looking ahead to a season in the Second Division at this point by, if you take things at face value. In his book, he says he released him because he didn't think he could do a job in the First Division. But there's 2 weeks apart there. And when you look at how all this tale has transpired, obviously Gates and Gabbiadini don't play together again. Gatesy goes off to Carlisle and has an indifferent season to end his career, unfortunately. But all of these players that we've talked about that Denis Smith has wanted to sign, the vast majority of them he does. Obviously, Gary Penrice was one that we talked about at the start of this pod, and he doesn't sign him. John Burney eventually gets. In a couple of months after that, he loses his job. Brian Mooney, we mentioned earlier, he ends up signing Brian Mooney the season after for Sunderland. Leroy Rossini was one of the first people he bought when he took over at Bristol City after he lost the Sunderland job. So he's going back in for these players because he's obviously keen on them. He's obviously watched them a lot and fancies them. But Peter Davenport comes in to replace Eric Gates in the First Division. He's kind of similar sort of player to Gatesy to a large extent, but I think he does all right with Marco. I don't think they were the reason that we didn't stay up. But again, it's interesting when you look back at the potential of Eric Gates playing in the top flight for a final season rather than playing for Carlisle that year. I always look back and think what might have been if Gatesy had been there with Davenport and Gabbiadini. Hauser got injured again very early on that next season. He got a terrible injury, didn't he, down in Bristol City. He did his Achilles. He missed the vast majority of it. But you kind of wonder, Kelvin, if Gatesy would have been able to step up or been a good player to bring off the bench at certain points that season. Obviously, we'll never know, but it would be nice to see him round his Sunderland career off back in the First Division, although it would have been four seasons later than he intended it to be.
Yeah. And, it is a sliding door as well, isn't it? What might have, how might he have helped the team? Could he have seen himself as just, a squad player who comes in and comes on at various points in games? Could he have done that? Watching him that night at St. James's Park, he could have done it no problem. He was fantastic that night, and you kind of feel the top tiers got nothing. You should have nothing to fear about the top tier, Eric. You can go and do a job for us for for a season. You might not play 90 minutes, you might not play consecutive games, but come and do a job and let's see what happens. I wonder if his wages, he was one of the highest earners at the club at that point, I think, and I wonder if that might have been a factor.
You can't imagine he got the equivalent of Carlisle, can you?
No, and I think was that more convenient in terms of his need to stay in the north. I was going to say the northeast. I know where Carlisle is, but was that part of that need to stay within the region? I don't know. It was an odd one, and he didn't have a great season at Carlisle. But I would have liked to have. I would have supported Smith in keeping him on for another season if that had been the case. The other thing bubbling away in the background was our financial situation. I'm trying to remember where all the carry-on in the boardroom was at that point. Batty and Murray and
still going on, I think, wasn't it?
That's my memory of it, was that it was still going on. It was a dreadful distraction in more ways than one from a fortuitous promotion, So I would have liked to have seen him stay. I'm feeling, with the benefit of hindsight, it gives you 20/20 vision, that he probably could have done a job if he'd been up for doing it. But I guess at that age, you have to put yourself through that, and I'm not sure that, I don't think he did want to put himself through it, is my guess from everything that he said and that he did at that time. And Davenport coming in, you could see what I really felt you could see what it's a good point that he was Gatesy like. He had a lovely touch on him at Davenport. I thought he was a lovely footballer, and I definitely had high hopes for him and Gabbiadini. I could definitely see what Smithy was playing out there and thinking, this this is my kind of forward line. I'm up for them to giving it a go and slicing their way through every top tier defence, and keeping us safe for that season up there. Wasn't to be.
The GD force wouldn't have worked as well as a nickname with Davenport. Just talking there about Gates's his wages and could he have done a job? I think, there was a huge question mark at that point about the validity of Murray's ownership and whether the club was going to be taken out of his hands. I think that, plus the fact that promotion was delayed until the middle of the summer, until the business with Swindon was sorted out, that did impact how much money was spent. If you remember, though, John McPhail also left. I know he made one appearance in the top division. He left, and I think it might be our mate Chris pointed this out. When John McPhail went to Hartlepool, I want to say, Hartlepool gave him better wages than he was on at ROKER Park. So maybe money was so tight that we couldn't keep hold of Gates. I can't remember what Smith said about Gates in his autobiography, but he did admit that letting McPhail go was a regret of his, and he wished he had a bit of that experience available to him at points in the first division. So it is very possible that Gates falls into that category as well.
No, Smith says in his book as well, he wished he'd kept Gates. He said,
does he mention that?
He thought he couldn't do a job in the first division, but on reflection, he thinks he would have been able to, and he should have given him a contract. Another interesting, which you just prompted there, Kelvin, when you were talking earlier, the fact he replaced, if we're looking at what was Denis Smith's ideal partnership, was the Gates and Gabbiadini partnership a bit of luck or by accident or design or whatever, the fact he tried to replace Gates with a like for like and not sign a target man in the time when the likes of Mick Harford, Alan Smith, Kerry Dixon, whoever else were leading the line for First Division clubs, suggests that maybe the Gabbiadini plus a playmaker rather than target man, whether he arrived at that conclusion that gets the best out of Marco, or that was his preferred style all along, who knows? At the very start, again, in his book, he admits that he signed Marco to partner Keith Birchin, and obviously Birchin's injuries scuppered that. But maybe at some point along the way, he realised that to get the best out of Marco, you needed a little playmaker rather than a big target man, and that might not have been his preference as a manager. And I think, you go back to what I said about his Bristol City days. He signed Leroy Rossinier and paired him with Andy Cole. And you kind of see what he was trying to do there, big man, little man. Maybe that was his preferred way of playing, but to get the best out of Marco, you need somebody maybe with a little bit more guile about him.
Maybe it's like the rest of us, Martin. He was swept along by that night at St. James's Park. This is the way forward.
Hey, you never know, do you? You never know. What's your vote? And stroke of luck, managerial genius, or a little bit of both? Andrew, where were you sitting after all of this?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the G-Force was ever his G plan. It's quite like that one, G-Plan Furniture.
I did not know where you were going with that, but
no, G-Plan Furniture was all the rage back in the day. Cut that bit out, Martin. That's just ruined the whole. Thing.
Stop pulling my chair legs there, Andrew. Come on, man. Oh yeah.
I think it was a huge element of luck, and you made an excellent point, Martin, about how that night at St. James's really did cement the legend of the G-Force. I'm wondering now, as we go through this, had we not beaten Newcastle, or had we not gone up and Gates had left that summer, is it a completely different conversation? And do we not remember that strike partnership in the way we do? Because there's definitely two G-Forces. There is definitely the one in our minds that has this magical aura around it. And then there's this one that Smith had in his mind and that the record books suggest, which isn't quite as all-conquering as we like to tell it. So yeah, I think there's an element of fortune and circumstance to the whole thing.
And you've got the third division G-Force and the St. James's Park G-Force, and then you've got the stuff in between that wasn't consistently as good as what we saw. It was good, very good, excellent on occasion, but Kelvin, it wasn't necessarily consistent. So where are you sitting with it?
So the G-Force, if you consider that they play 3 seasons together, they score an average of 35 goals a season, the G-Force. Yeah. So clearly they can play with each other, and they are effective when they play with each other, given the right circumstances. There can't be any real doubt about the fact that they were good for each other and were an effective partnership on that day. I think there is an element of sliding doors. You pull at a number of different straws on this one. If Hauser, for instance, had come across and gotten a decent run, would that have been him if he'd hung on to Billy Whitehurst? Billy Whitehurst was a very popular figure amongst some of the fans, really liked Billy Whitehurst, and there were, I think it was a bit harsh when I was talking about him. There was a, I can just see him hanging around outside my front door there.
Who's at the window, Calvin?
Bailey's going to get you. Bailey's going to get you.
I would throw, that would be an example of if that had panned out, would we have been talking about the G-Force? It's a great point about if we'd gotten beat at St. James's Park, would we have been talking about the G-Force? But the fact is, we didn't get beat, and we did win. And on that night, they did show us everything that they were about. and absolutely turned over the visitors in a way that I'll never forget. I'll never forget that night. It was majestic. And on their night, them two were, on their day, them two were really, really great together. And they played football that was really nice to watch as well. So an element of luck. It's a little bit of everything. There's an element of luck. There's a sliding door, but there's also two players that were individually very, very good players. And when you put them together, by God, they could click.
And, two exceptionally good players who, as you say, they got the best out of each other. You talked before about, or earlier in the series, about Eric Gates's struggles to find the way the team could get the best out of him. And Marco was part of that, getting the best out of him. There was somebody for him to play in rather than him being the person chasing through balls. And it's always telling that Denis Smith tried to buy different players, buy strikers, put some young players in, whoever. Always came back to Gates, partner Gabbiadini. And he always kept coming back to that, because while he might have ideally wanted to do something different, he always came back to the fact that that partnership together got the best out of Marco, which was ultimately what he wanted, because he was wanted by Liverpool, Manchester United. Scouts were at ROKER Park every week. There was talks of 1.5, 2 million, 2.5 million bids. There was talk of him going to Italia 90 at the end of this season. Steve Bull went, didn't he? But Marco was in the frame. He played for the England B team in the run-up to the end of the season at ROKER Park. And, again, different sliding doors moment there. Could have been Gabbiadini playing at Italia 90 and England win the World Cup. So I would put a smile on your face, wouldn't it, Kelvin? Thank goodness this isn't a visual medium, isn't it?
Gabbiadini could have gone to Italia 90 and played for the hosts as well if he wanted. So, he could have played for two teams at that tournament.
Well, there we go. There's something for us to ponder over as we watch the World Cup unfold this month, isn't it? Gabbiadini lining up in the blue of Italy, who, they might have made it to this World Cup if he'd still been able to pull his boots on, mightn't they? But there we go. Right, we will wrap it up there. It was quite a long part 3, but there you go. We'll keep it to 3 parts. So thank you very much to everyone for listening. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Kelvin. It's been great fun delving back through the archives and talking about all the bits that combined to make the G-Force, hasn't it?
Learned a bit there.
Yeah.
My memory, it's definitely rejigged me memory a little bit going through all that. And Billy Whitehurst, Billy, if you're in town, mate, up for getting you a beer.
Just don't go anywhere with bouncers. There we go.
Kelvin's right. We have learned. God, we've learned. We've laughed. I sound a bit like Jerry Springer now. But I'll tell you what, throughout all of this conversation, Denis Smith, whether the G-Force was intended or not, great manager for us. Great manager who took us up through a couple of divisions, saved us from being on the brink of disaster when he took over and when Gates's career and the whole club looked as if they were done. So yeah, some good memories in that story, and some times that we can look back on and thank those involved for the job they did.
Right manager at the right time, and one who was sacked too early, but that's a whole other podcast in itself. I think we'll be back next week with another episode of ROKER Rewind, and we'll be back tomorrow, of course, with another episode of How We're the Podcast. Until then, goodbye from us.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Selling your car should feel like one less thing on your list, not one more. With Carvana, it is. Just go to Carvana.com, enter your license plate or VIN, and get a real offer down to the penny. No back and forth, no surprises, just an experience you can trust. Like your offer? Accept it. Schedule pickup, and we'll come to you with a check in hand. Your car, your timeline, your terms. Visit Carvana.com to sell your car today.
Carvana.
Pickup fees may apply.